What's up? I'm Angie, and you are listening to Podcast That Pays, the podcast for online business owners who want to grow their business and sell their offers using podcasting. If you like no fluff, tell it like it is advice from a marketing-loving podcast agency owner, you are in the right place. So glad you're here. Let's dive in. Okay, boo. You are in for a treat today if you are listening to this podcast, because what I'm about to do is really, truly just drag you through the mud. If you are an existing podcaster and you want to grow your podcast, I'm so sorry. I'm going to shame you. I know people are like anti-shame marketing, but like the shame really works for me. And I really just want to drag you through the mud right now because there's no excuse for this shit. But anyway, this is your wake-up call. This is your truth. I'm just telling the truth. This is the truth about why your podcast isn't growing. This is the truth about why you are sitting there talking about how you want your podcast to do X, Y, Z, and this is blah, blah, blah for your business. And here's why it ain't doing it. I'm about to give you the real, boo. The real freaking real. And that's okay. We all need some real sometimes. I'm that friend that's going to give you the real. Just look at me like the friend that gives you the real truth. Okay, so first let's talk about some of the things that people think help you grow your podcast that doesn't help you grow your podcast. And I think the biggest thing that people think that helps grow your podcast is being consistent. People are like, if you're consistent, you have to create content every week. You create content every week, and that's how you grow your podcast. And you can't grow your podcast if you don't create content every week. And that's bullshit. And it just is, because content and consistency alone will not grow your podcast. You can sit in your podcast closet, as I am sitting in my podcast closet. You can sit in your closet every single night and record a new episode and put that shit out there for people to listen to weekly, religiously, every single week. And your podcast can still not grow. Ask me how I know. I know because this is what I experience consistently with my clients, with people who come to me for help, with people who are in my group, with people who are in my membership. People are asking me, like I'll have people who come to me who have been podcasting for years. You hear me? Years, which I commend. I think this is very awesome that you can like stay committed to podcasting that long. But people podcast consistently for years, every single week, religiously, don't miss a week. And their podcast is at the same or very little growth from when they began. Seriously, I know that sounds really depressing because it's depressing for me. That's really depressing for me, is that you can be podcasting for years, be really consistent with your content, and your podcast could not grow because content alone is not going to make your podcast grow. Again, I will say this again in this episode, like I say in every episode. The place to start with every single thing, diagnosing everything that is going on with your podcast, the place to start is always with your content. So when I have a new client, when I have someone who has an existing podcast, someone who thinks that they got it, they always tell me, I got it. I know I got it on the content piece. It is always their content that we have to redo. Always. Okay. Because there's creating content and talking about things that you want to talk about. And there's creating content that's actually compelling and going to move the needle for you. Okay. So you can be creating all the content in the world and you still cannot be getting results. And so this is the truth. So stop thinking, if I just can be consistent, then I can grow my podcast, because this is not always the truth. I know it's a hard pill to swallow, but that's the truth of the matter. Now, what is the truth then? What's the freaking truth? If it's not consistency, then why is my podcast not growing? The truth is that you aren't trying. The truth is that you haven't dedicated the time and attention and energy that is required for you to grow your podcast, or that you just don't possess the know-how. And that's okay, because I'm going to help you a little bit with that if that's you. So if you really feel like you've been trying everything, if you really feel like you've been giving your all and it hasn't happened, I'm not talking to you. I don't want to drag you. I want to drag you in love. For the others who complain about your podcast not growing, but you're literally not doing anything to make it grow, we're going to drag you through the mud with love. So the truth is you're not trying. So one of the things that I always ask people when they say, how do I grow my podcast, is what have you currently been doing? And I will get a couple of different answers. I will get some people that tell me that they post on social media, and I will get people who don't have any idea what they're doing. Well, they're like, I don't know, I'm just creating a new episodes and they're not doing anything. I asked someone this the other day, and their answer was, well, when I have a new episode, what I do is I put it on my stories on Instagram and I post about it. And I was like, okay, well, what else? And they were like, that's what I do. And so for clarification, I was like, so for that one podcast episode, they email it out too. I said, for that one podcast episode, every time you have an episode release, you email it out to your list and say, hey, new episode. And then you put it on your Instagram stories. And they were like, yes. And I was like, okay, so that means that we're talking about that episode literally 2 times ever. That's it. There's no strategy behind that. There's no strategy for when the podcast episode didn't first come out. It's like you got 2 chances to grab everyone who's going to listen to this. And if they don't listen, then oh well, right? And I'm laughing because I think that that's ludicrous to think that we're going to grow our podcast from posting about it 2 freaking times. I think it's absolutely ludicrous. And so I'm saying all these things in advance to say, you probably think that you're trying, but you're really not trying. You probably think you're doing what you are supposed to do because that's what you've seen other people do. You've seen other people start an Instagram account that's all about their podcast. And so you think you have to start an Instagram account to grow your podcast. And I am telling you, do not start an Instagram account. Do not start a separate Instagram account, because we're only one person or a couple people in our business. And there's just so much extra work. And ask yourself this, how many Instagram accounts do you follow that are podcasts that you enjoy following? 0, probably, right? Like not very many. You like enjoy you enjoy people, right? So I want you to get real about what you're doing. And I want you to get real about the fact that any platform that you dip your toe into, that you want to build, that you're serious, that you really like this platform, I really want this to work for me, you are going to have to put time, effort, and energy into this damn thing. That it is not enough to just show up and say, hey, I created this thing, look at me, and think that that's going to be the thing that grows you on that platform. It's not enough, period. So what I challenge you to do is I want you to write down right now what you are currently doing to help grow your podcast, because you came here to listen to this episode because this is the hottest topic that every podcaster wants to know. How do I grow my podcast? How do I grow my podcast? But I want to know first, what are you currently doing? What are you doing right now? Do you have, and then I want you to recognize, do you have a system that is helping you grow? Do you know what you do every single time? Is there a set thing that you do every single time? And what's that thing? And then how do you track that? Do you know that it's growing? And is it working or is it not working? I want to know those things before we continue. So take a minute. Tell me those things. Write those things down. What are you currently doing consistently all the time? And what are you doing to track that? How do you know if it's working? Is it working? Is it not working? Hey, if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, I really need to up my podcasting game, or you want to start utilizing your show more for your business to get more leads and sell more offers, then I want you to come over to podcastthatpays.com and check out the Podcast Collab Lab. That's podcastthatpays.com and check out what we're doing over there. I would love you to join us. Okay, back to the show. That's what I want to know. Now, here's why people don't really try to grow their podcasts. Because most of the time, the issue is that there's a lot of half-ass effort in this. There's a lot of half-ass effort, or again, you don't have the knowledge, which is fine. But there's a lot of half-ass effort. And here's why. It's because you don't really see the value in putting effort into this. You don't really see the value in putting effort into growing your podcast. Why? Because your podcast isn't yielding any visible results for you. Because you feel like you're talking into the abyss. You feel like you're just sitting here talking to yourself. You're not getting any positive feedback. You're not getting any validation. And so you don't want to put more effort into something that's not, quote unquote, working for you in your business. You have to put your attention to the things that are, quote unquote, working, like the social media post that gets likes right away. Because that seems like it's working because it's validated quicker for us, right? It's relatable. I relate to that. So we want to put more effort into that. Then we want to put into growing our podcast. So that's why we're not putting the effort in. That's why it's a back burner activity. And that's the truth for most people about the growth of their podcast is a back burner activity. Like they record an episode and then you talk about it 2 times. That is back burner shit. That is side chick, side piece. That ain't even side piece. That is like long lost ex that like every once in a while when you don't have anything to do, you throw some crumbs to. That's what that is. It's not even side piece energy. And the reason why you give it that energy, the reason why you throw it just crumbs is because you don't see the value in it. You don't see the value. So why don't you see the value? It's because social media has fucking ruined us all in the best way also. I love social media. Like I love it. I talk about it, but I also love it because I love that I've met so many people and made so many connections, and you can get that quick feedback. But it's like we have gotten so ruined. It's like the invention of fast food. And we all started eating this fast food, and because we got to get it instantly. We didn't have to cook, and it was so easy for us. And then lo and behold, we found out that we should have been continuing to cook our damn food the whole time because the fast food wasn't good for us, even though it was quick and convenient and easy and fun. It's the same thing with social media. We see more value in that because I can write a post right now and I can get 50 comments and 100 likes on it. So we know that's good. Yes, let's do that. People are responding. It's working. We think it's working. And it could be working, right? That's fine. This is not an anti-social media. But what I'm saying is that's why we found it easy to abandon fundamental foundational things in our business. Nobody wants to do evergreen content anymore. Nobody wants to build an email list anymore because those things are boring. Those things aren't dopamine hits. Those things aren't the things that give you the warm and fuzzies. I'm sitting here doing my podcast episode in a room, in a closet by myself, and nobody's liking it. Nobody is on here writing comments under here. Nobody is cheering me on. Nobody is. No one. So like, it feels like it's not worth it. It's not as fun. I don't get that instant validation. And so the social media has like ruined us in a way because we have forgotten about foundational things that help us build our business and keep us and sustain us, even when we're going through moments where we can't or don't feel like showing up online so much. Like sometimes you don't feel like it, and that's fine, right? But it's not fine if that's the only thing you have and you created. It's like building your house on quicksand. I'm going to go Bible reference here. It's like building your house on quicksand. Because if the only thing you have is your social media and you don't show up for it, then what do you really have? Nothing. It's like gone. You have to continuously show up. You have to continuously water the grass continuously. And this, a podcast, is something that's a foundational piece, element to your marketing, to your business. It lives on and on and on and on and on. Matter of fact, it picks up steam. You get more and more and more people to see it the longer that it lives. It's beautiful. This beautiful core foundational piece to your business and platform with evergreen content that can help you in every other way in your business. But we neglect it because we don't get dopamine hits from it. I feel like I am preaching at the pulpit. Okay. I'm a Bible Belt girl. I'm from Louisiana. And right now, I just want to get an amen. But you know what? I'm on a podcast, so nobody's going to say shit to me. Okay. But I feel like I need a mic to drop. I need a pulpit. Give me the pulpit. Call me Preacher Ange. The last episode I recorded, I was talking about I was late nights with Ange, and now I'm Preacher Ange. I'm late night preaching. Okay. Late night preaching. So these are the reasons why you don't see the value in this shit. You don't see the value. And I'm saying what we've seen recently happen in the marketing space, in the online space, is that it's gotten harder to be seen on social media. You have to create 8 times more content. You have to always be on. You have to be there all the time, blah, blah, blah. And I've seen a lot of people get burnt out. And a lot of people are wishing that they had built their house on solid ground instead of on sand. A lot of people who wish that they would have grown their email list, done their podcast, have evergreen content, have their blog and their website done, because those are things that last forever versus the constant hamster wheel of social media. But I get it. It's that easy fast food. It's that quick fix. It's sticking something in the microwave and getting it out in 2 minutes. It's done. And I love it. I love it also. But what I'm saying is, this is why we don't put full effort, is because we don't see that return. The second reason why we're not really growing our podcast is because we've never had a strategy. We don't even think about a strategy. It's like there's a podcast that comes out, we post it a couple times, and that's it. That's the only strategy for growth. And that is not good. And I don't know if it's because we're not digging into how to have a strategy, or we just don't know, or it's this, again, it's not even the side piece. It's the long lost ex who we throw a crumb to every now and again, right? I got an ex who I don't throw no crumbs. I'm not even going to go there because I don't even throw crumbs. But he'd be trying to get me to throw crumbs. I don't throw no crumbs. But we don't have a strategy. We're just throwing shit up against the wall. And then saying, Angie, I don't know why it's not working. Well, like, what are you doing? How are you measuring it? Are you tracking what's working? Are you seeing what's not? What have you done? What are the results of what you're getting? Right? Like big girl marketing shit, big girl stuff. It's like, let's put our big girl panties on and figure out if we really love this thing, we really like this method, we really like this platform. It's like, it's time to put your big girl panties on and say, okay, what can I do to help grow this? What am I currently doing? What do I need to be doing? And then the other reason why we're not growing is because we're not consistent. We're not consistent in the way that we show up for our podcast to deliver content. And we're not consistent with how we're sharing it. We're just not consistent. And so that could also play into the, we don't see the value. So it's the back burner. It's the side chick. It's the below side chick. I want you to tell me in life what we really can have. What can we really have and achieve in life without being consistent, without putting in effort? And the answer is nothing. We have nothing. We have nothing. If you want to build muscles, you know what you have to do? You have to be consistent, and you have to have a strategy, and you have to follow a plan. You got to eat a lot of fucking protein. I tell you that. You got to go to the gym. Like, you can't just say, I want to build muscle, and then show up at the gym once a month when you decide you want to build muscle and think that you're going to build muscles, because you're not. It's the consistency. It's the strategy. It's the understanding what's going on and what we're doing. Okay. So if you've had enough dragging, let's talk about some of the growth strategies that you need to pay attention to. Okay. Number 1, if you're serious about growing your podcast, you need to dig into podcast SEO. You need to optimize your podcast so that search engines can index it correctly, so the people who are looking for you can find you. Period. This is SEO is a longer game. One of my friends, was doing a training in my group. She does SEO. She's an SEO specialist. And one of the things she talked about was how in her podcast, 50% of her listens a month come from older episodes. And I was like, hell yeah, I love that statistic. Like, I love that statistic because that means that once I create this podcast episode that I'm creating right now, people will listen to this shit for years. And I mean years, especially if you do it right, years. Versus a social media post, that shit is gone. Bye-bye. And yeah, you can repurpose them, but like they're gone. Bye-bye. They are gone. Bye-bye. This shit can sit here. I had a client who came to me and she was redoing her podcast, meaning she had an existing podcast. And she was like, I want to revamp my podcast, but I'm not sure if I want to continue on with my old podcast or start brand new. She hadn't podcasted in 3 years. We went to her I was like, well, you know what? Let's pull up the analytics for your podcast and let's see like who's listening, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. We pull up her podcast. She's still getting 100 downloads a month. And she had not touched her podcast in 3 years. Like, if that ain't content working for you while you ain't doing nothing, I don't know what else is. It's like, and that's the power of like search engine optimization. It's the power of like creating on this platform. And I love that so much. So search engine optimization, you need to position yourself in the place that people would be searching for you. If you don't have a podcast website, you need to get a podcast website today. You need to build that foundation where people can start finding you from other ways, not just social media, like foundational things that'll last forever, evergreen, foundational pieces. It's important. It's what will carry you through times when you might want to have a fucking mental breakdown. You might want to have a time where you go off and have a baby and like you're at home or you're going through a time something's happened in your life and you want to step away for a second. Like if you don't have these foundational pieces, if you don't have this evergreen content, you're fucked. You'd be fucked. You'd be screwed because you have to consistently show up and create content in order for things to happen in your business versus if you create this content that's always going to work for you and you do this. Like SEO is a great tool to be able to get your stuff out there. So what are people searching for where they would find you? So hopefully with this episode that I'm creating right now, people are searching for how to grow a podcast. And then here I am to drag them. Here I am to give them the real. Hopefully that's what pops up, right? Hopefully I'll be able to get myself the skills, the knowledge where when someone searches on Google, I can be there. Wouldn't that be awesome? Over and over and over again. And I created this content one time. Be awesome. So you have to figure out what those keywords are, what are people searching? And then you need to put them in your podcast episode. You need to put them in your show notes. You need to put them in your blog post about your podcast episode. You need to put them in your description of your podcast. You need to put them in your titles so you can maximize that. I'm not going to go deep into teaching SEO. There's a training in my membership on SEO where you can really dig in and learn more about podcast SEO. But I will say podcast SEO is a fairly new thing, meaning Google didn't start indexing actual podcasts until 2018. So that's fairly new in the world of Google's, right? So if you get in now and you start really maximizing that, you might not see instant results, but you're going to see those long-term foundational results, the long-term shit that nobody wants to do anymore because we have been so conditioned to get a quick, easy response from podcasting. I mean, not from podcasting, from social media. The second growth strategy is podcast guesting and swapping. So let's meet people where they already are. They're already listening to this person's podcast. We know they're podcast listeners. Let's insert ourselves into places where people are already listening to podcasts on the podcast app. So being intentional about being a guest on different podcasts is really important strategy. Really important. So that'll help you if you're directing people back to your podcast, which you should, because they're podcast listeners. So it's like, hey, come and listen to my podcast. It's perfect. And then podcast swapping is like, when you would get with someone who has a similar, topic or adjacent topic to what you're doing, and we can swap episodes. I can highlight you on my podcast. They can highlight me on their podcast. And so we're both leveraging the power of each other's audiences. We can do that. I can take your episode. You're my biz bestie. I have a perfect person in my world. Like a perfect example is someone who is a Facebook ad strategist, and she does Facebook ads for podcasts. Like, let's take an episode that you've created about Facebook ads and I'll publish it on my podcast, and vice versa. You publish mine on your podcast. Like, let's tap into other people's audiences, have them highlight each other. Another thing you can do is you can actually sponsor podcast episodes on podcasts that you think have a relevant audience to you. Because again, we're meeting them in the podcast app. Like if we can meet them in a podcast app, that's like that is an optimal thing that we want to do, because we know they're already listening to podcasts. They're already on the app. Like, come over from this podcast to my podcast. And then the last thing is leveraging your social media. And I put it last for a reason. I put it last for a reason because it can be the hard, longer game to get, not longer game, but it can be harder to get people off of social media onto a podcast. It's not really like a natural progression, right? So it's great to build a big audience around your podcast on social media, and you should. And you should leverage those people to share your podcast or to come to your podcast to give you reviews, give you shares, things like that. You should 100% do those things. Again, I break this down even further because it's just too much to put into a podcast episode. The main goal of this podcast episode is to show you that you aren't doing as much as you think you're doing. You aren't doing as much as you think you're doing, and that you can do more if this is something you really want to do. So you have to decide, is this what I really want to do? Do I see enough benefit in this? Is this what I really want to go all in on? And then you have to have a strategy. So all those things that I said. So what is the strategy? What is the plan? What do we do consistently all the time? What do we do consistently all the time? Because that's what's important. Because then we can go through and we can see and measure results, see what's working, see what's not working. And then we can tweak those things. We can grow from there. But if we never put a strategy in place and we never actually go back and see if this strategy is working or measure like the results, then we never know what's really happening. And so that's what needs to happen. Even if your strategy is, I'm just going to email my list every time. Okay, let's see. How are those emails working? Who is actually coming to your podcast from your email? Maybe we start there. Maybe you can just tweak what emails you're sending. Maybe you're not sending them in the right way. Maybe all you're doing is focusing on saying, hey, episode 29 is out, instead of leading with value for them and what's valuable for them around your podcast. So maybe what you need to do is tweak your email, but we don't know that. And so then we tweak it, and then we can see what the results yield after that. So then we can say, oh, this is working better. So let's move from this to this, because we already know what was happening previously. And now that we tweaked it, we can see that this is getting us a better result, or this isn't working. And then we could try something else. But if you're never measuring it, then you're never going to know. And you're never going to know how to tweak it. You're never going to know what works for you. And you're never going to see that consistent growth and success that you're wanting to see, because you don't have a strategy in place, and you're not tracking and seeing if it's even working what you're doing. You're just doing shit. What's the point of just doing shit if it's not even working? If no one from your email is clicking over to your podcast, why the fuck are you still sending emails? Like, does that seem logical? We have so much shit to do in our business. We are pulled so many different directions. Why are we still doing shit that is not yielding us results? And if you're not sure if it's yielding results or not, start there. Is this working? And then let's try something different. And then just know, when you're doing these different strategies, when it comes to podcast growth, like, you need to give yourself a couple months to see what is being effective. It's not as quickly as social media. It's just not. You need a couple months to see, like, is this strategy being effective? Is this working for me? Is this better or worse than what I was doing before? So I want you to really examine, is this something that you want to do? Are you really all in it? Do you really believe in the power of it? Do you really want to show up for this and really grow it? Because if so, then you need a fucking strategy. And if so, you really need to be leaning into and thinking about how you are switching your mindset from getting these instant dopamine hits to putting things in place that are going to save you time later. I always talk about this book I read by Rory Vaden that talks about procrastinate on purpose. And he talks about how rich and successful people spend their time. And you know what they spend their time doing? They don't spend their time running around putting out all the little fires that seem like they're the most important things. They spend their time doing the things now that save them time later. In this analogy, if you didn't catch it, the little fires everywhere are doing things on social media because those seem like the most urgent. They seem like, oh, I got to post this. I got to post. And then it's a never ending hamster wheel. And instead, leave that, procrastinate on that, and do the things now that are going to save you the time later. Do the things now that are going to relieve you later of your content creation problems, of your, okay, I got to step away from my business. Okay, I couldn't create. Okay, I feel like shit. I don't know. And I couldn't create. I couldn't keep up. But you know what? I consistently have this thing growing in the background because I have a system. I know what I'm doing. I'm tracking it. And this is going to be some foundational pieces to my business and to my marketing that is going to save me a shit ton of time later and going to be working for me in the background while I am doing absolutely the fuck nothing. And so that's how I want you to see creating this. I want you to see how valuable this is. And if you don't see how valuable it is, you will never fucking grow it. Never. You will be stuck at some wonky numbers. Okay. So I hope that this reached you where it needed to reach you. If you want to chat, if you need help, hit me up at Angie M. Jordan on Instagram at Angie M. Jordan. Hit me up. Come and chat with me in my DMs. I would love to talk to you to see how I can help you. And I will talk to you in the next episode. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, if you enjoyed the show, head over to podcastthatpays.com to get started on your way to creating a podcast that pays. And don't forget to follow this show and take a screenshot that you were listening and tag me on Instagram at Angie M. Jordan. I'd love to meet you and show you some love over there. Thank you so much for being here. I love you. Let's get this money.